My mother was still warm when my sister changed the locks. I found out the way you find out everything in my family, late, and by accident. A neighbor called. Sweet woman, Mrs. Patton, who used to bring my mother sweet tea and Judge Judy reruns on a thumb drive. She said she saw a locksmith truck out front of the house on Crestwood Drive. Said she saw my sister, Renee, directing the man like she owned the place. Because by then, legally, she did. My name is Carol. I'm 47 years old. I grew up in a small town outside of Austin, Texas, where everybody knows your grandmother's maiden name and nobody forgets anything. And I'm going to tell you the story of how my 72-year-old mother, a woman who survived a stroke, outlived a husband, and raised 2 daughters on a teacher's salary, got systematically emptied. Not robbed. Emptied. There's a difference, and it took me almost 2 years to understand it. But here's what I need you to sit with. Right from the start, the person who did it wasn't a stranger, wasn't a con artist from the internet. It was my sister, the one who called herself the responsible one, the one who stayed close to home. And the thing that still keeps me up at night, in my apartment in North Dallas, with the hum of the highway outside my window, my mother knew. She knew something was wrong. She tried to tell me. And I didn't listen fast enough. Let me paint you the before, because without it, none of the after makes sense. My mother, Donna, retired from Cedar Creek Elementary after 31 years. 3rd grade. She had this thing she did with reluctant readers. She'd read them a chapter, stop right at the good part, close the book, and say, "That's all for today." Kids would beg her to keep going. She always said, "The wanting to know is the whole point." I think about that a lot now. She lived in the same 3-bedroom house on Crestwood Drive that she and my dad bought in 1989. Brown shutters. A pecan tree in the back that dropped enough nuts every fall to supply half the county. The kind of house that smells like cedar and old paperbacks. After Dad died, that was 2018, pancreatic cancer, 6 weeks from diagnosis to gone, my mother shrunk. Not in a way you could really see at first. She still went to church, still kept the bird feeders full, but something behind her eyes went quiet, in a way it hadn't been before. That's when Renee moved in. Not into the house, not exactly. She lived 20 minutes away, in a newer build over in Pflugerville, with her husband, Derek, and their 2 kids. But she started coming by every single day, running errands, taking Mom to appointments. I actually thought, that was love. That's my enabling flaw. Right there. I mistook proximity for devotion. I was the one who'd moved away. I'd been in Dallas for 12 years, working in medical billing. I visited every couple of months. I called twice a week. I thought that was enough. I told myself that was enough. I was wrong. I need to ask you something, right here, early on. Have you ever been the sibling who left? Not abandoned, just built a life somewhere else, and then carried the guilt of it forever? Tell me in the comments, because I wonder how many of us there are. I didn't think I had to watch. I thought family watched each other. I thought love was the insurance policy. It's not. Over the next 3 years, Renee became the center of my mother's daily life. She handled the grocery runs to the Kroger on Slaughter Lane. She managed the utility bills. She drove Mom to the cardiologist, the eye doctor, the pharmacy. She became, in every practical sense, the person who kept my mother's world running. And she was good at it, I want to be fair. She is organized in a way I've never been. She keeps spreadsheets for things other people keep in their heads. She sends follow-up texts after phone calls. She is, in the language of real estate and wills and estate law, what people call the involved party. That word, involved, it does a lot of work. It sounds like love. It looks like love. It creates paper trails that look, to any outside observer, like love. But here's the thing. Love and leverage aren't the same thing. And in an estate, the difference between the two can be worth $600,000. That's what my mother's house was valued at. The house on Crestwood Drive, the savings account she'd been adding to for 30 years, and a small investment portfolio my father had left behind. $614,000, give or take. I didn't know that number. Not exactly. Mom was private about money, the way women of her generation often are. It was enough or not enough. Never a specific figure. She'd say, "I'm not a burden, Carol. Don't worry about me." And I wouldn't. Worry. About the money, anyway. I should have. The first sign I ignored was a phone call in March of 2022. Mom called me on a Tuesday, which wasn't unusual, but she was quiet in a different way than normal. There's tired quiet and there's uneasy quiet, and this was the second one. She asked me if I knew anything about a trust document. Said Renee had brought over some papers. Said a lawyer, friend of Derek's apparently, had come to the house to go over them. I said, Mom, what kind of trust? She said she wasn't sure. Said it was something about making things easier. She said the word easier like she was reading it off a page she didn't quite believe. And I actually said this, well, if Renee's handling it, it's probably fine. She's good with that stuff. I set down the phone and went back to my Tuesday. That's the moment I replay. That's the one. The small aggressions started around the same time. Things I noticed, but explained away with a different story. Renee would call me to loop me in on Mom's health. Always. With this tone, professionally warm, slightly impatient. Like a nurse briefing an out-of-town relative who'd shown up at the wrong time. She'd use phrases like, we've decided, and the doctors recommend in ways that made me feel like I was a guest in my own family's decisions. Once, I drove down for Mom's birthday and Renee had already arranged a dinner with her own friends from church. There were 11 people at the table I'd never met. Mom sat at the head, smiling in that effortful way she had, and I sat at the far end next to a woman named Barbara who sold insurance and talked about her hip replacement for 40 minutes. After dinner, when everyone was gone, I found Mom in the kitchen, washing dishes alone. I asked if she was okay. She said, it's nice to have family close, and I couldn't tell if she was talking about me, or apologizing for Renee, or warning me about something. A few months later, I asked Mom directly about the trust documents. She said Renee had explained it all, and it made sense. She said the lawyer was very nice. She couldn't remember his last name. I asked her if she'd had her own lawyer look it over. Independent. Someone who worked for her. Not for the family. She paused. That pause. The refrigerator was humming. There was a half-finished crossword on the kitchen table. She said, I didn't think I needed to. Renee had told her it was routine. A formality. Just making sure everything was taken care of so that when the time came, nobody would have to fight over anything. She'd framed it as a gift. As the responsible thing. As what Dad would have wanted. And Mom, who was 71 years old, and grieving and tired and trusting, had signed. I want to pause here and ask, if you saw your own mother being walked through papers she didn't fully understand, would you speak up? Or would you trust the family member who was there? Leave me a comment, because I'm still working through what I could have done differently. I didn't know yet what she'd signed. Not the full version. I had a bad feeling, the kind that lives in your chest without a name. But I didn't have facts. And without facts, I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself Renee was difficult. Controlling, maybe, but not this. I was still telling myself that in September, when my mother had her second stroke. The stroke happened on a Wednesday morning. Mom was alone. Renee was the one who called 911. Renee was the one who rode in the ambulance. Renee was the one who called me. 2 hours later, after they'd already stabilized her, after the doctors had already been briefed, after visiting hours had already started, and said, in that calm, practiced voice of hers, Mom's had an episode. She's stable. You don't need to rush. I rushed anyway. I drove 4 hours from Dallas to Austin in 3.5. I walked into St. David's Medical Center with highway coffee still in my hand, and my mother looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. The light in that room was the flat, merciless kind that hospitals use. The kind that makes everyone look like a before photo. She had a tube in her arm, and a heart monitor, making its soft, metronomic sound. She reached for my hand and held it the way you hold something you're afraid of dropping. She said, Carol, I need you to find my papers. Not hello, not I'm okay. Find my papers. I told her we'd talk about it later. She said, not later. Now. The blue folder. Bottom drawer of the file cabinet in the bedroom. Don't tell Renee. Renee walked in 12 minutes after that. She had 2 coffees from the vending machine and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She asked how the drive was. I said fine. We sat on opposite sides of the bed for an hour without saying anything real. The heart monitor kept its count between us. I went to Crestwood Drive that night. Renee had a key. Of course she did. But so did I, from years back, The original copy Mom gave me when I first moved to Dallas. I half expected the lock to have already been changed. It hadn't. Not yet. The blue folder was exactly where Mom said. Bottom drawer, under a stack of old utility bills and a birthday card from 2019 that I'd sent her. She'd kept it. That detail nearly finished me. I sat on the floor of that bedroom for 2 hours reading. Here's what Renee had done. And I want to be precise, because precision is the only thing that matters now. 3 years earlier, my mother had signed a revocable living trust. Standard enough instrument. But the trust had been amended. Quietly, 14 months after the original signing, to name Renee as sole successor trustee and sole primary beneficiary. The amendment also granted Renee immediate durable power of attorney over all financial matters. Every account. The house. The investment portfolio Dad had left. My name appeared once in the entire document. In a clause that said, in language so clean it must have taken a lawyer to make it sound that polite, that any other heirs had been considered and intentionally excluded. Intentionally excluded. I read those 2 words 4 times. The refrigerator was humming in the kitchen. There was a smell in the house. Cedar and something stale. The smell of a place that'd been tidied by someone who didn't live there. I sat on my mother's floor, and I didn't cry. I went somewhere else instead. Somewhere cold and very still. That's when I stopped being a daughter and started being a detective. The next 3 weeks were the most boring, methodical weeks of my life. And I mean that as the highest possible compliment to myself. I didn't confront Renee. I didn't call her screaming. I didn't post anything on Facebook. I went to an estate attorney, my own, a woman named Patricia Okafor, who had an office in Round Rock and a reputation for not blinking, and I laid every piece of paper on her desk. Patricia read for a long time without speaking. Then she said, "Tell me about your mother's mental state at the time of the amendment." That was the question. I went back to every doctor my mother had seen in the 18 months before that amendment was signed. I requested records. I drove to the optometrist, the cardiologist, the GP she'd had for 20 years. I sat in waiting rooms with a legal pad, writing down names and dates. I found a note, one small notation, from her GP's visit in April of that year. Patient appeared confused recent financial decisions. Recommend cognitive screening. The screening was never ordered. Renee had taken my mother to that appointment. I found the notary who'd witnessed the amendment signing. He worked out of a up store in Pflugerville. I asked him if he remembered the appointment. He said he did a lot of signings. I asked if he recalled whether the older woman with him seemed to understand what she was signing. He got quiet. He said her daughter did most of the talking. I wrote that down. Stories like this don't happen in courtrooms first. They happen in file cabinets and waiting rooms and up stores. If you've ever had to dig for the truth in your own family, you know what this feels like. Stick around, because it's about to get very real. Patricia filed the petition in Travis County Probate Court 6 weeks later. It alleged undue influence, lack of capacity at time of signing, and financial elder abuse under Texas statute. That last one isn't a civil matter. That one has teeth. Renee found out on a Thursday. I know this because she called me Thursday evening. First time she'd called me, not texted, called, in 4 months. Her voice was different. The professional warmth was gone. What replaced it was something thinner, tighter. She said, "This is not what you think it is." I said, "Tell me what it is then." She said Mom had wanted this. Said Mom had told her years ago she didn't want the estate split because she was worried I'd mismanage it. Said she was just honoring Mom's real wishes. The ones she'd expressed in private. The ones I wasn't around to hear, because I'd chosen to live 4 hours away. There it was. The logic of it. The rational actor, right on schedule. In Renee's version of events, she wasn't a thief. She was the loyal daughter. The one who stayed. The one who earned it. I was the one who'd abandoned the family and now wanted to swoop in at the end and collect. That was her story, and I genuinely believe, she had told it to herself so many times it had become true inside her head. It didn't matter. Patricia had a notary. A doctor's notation. Bank records showing 3 transfers from my mother's savings account to a joint account Renee had quietly opened in both their names. $41,000, moved in increments small enough to stay below the reporting threshold. That's not grief. That's not loyalty. That's a wire transfer strategy. The deposition was scheduled for a February morning. Renee showed up with Derek, and a lawyer I recognized from the Austin Bar Association newsletter. One of those attorneys, whose practice is built on making messy family situations quietly disappear. He was very smooth, very confident. He made a motion to dismiss based on the argument that Mom had been mentally competent at signing. He cited one document, a routine consent form from a dental visit, where she'd signed her name clearly and without assistance. Patricia let him finish. Then she put the GP's notation on the table. Then the notary's statement. Then she asked Renee, on the record, to explain the $41,000. Renee said it was a gift. Patricia asked if there was a gift letter, a tax filing, any documentation. There wasn't. The silence in that room lasted about 4 seconds. I counted. Derek put his hand on Renee's arm. Her lawyer leaned in and whispered something. Renee looked at the table. She didn't look at me. She never looked at me. I want to ask you something. At what point does loyalty to family become a reason to look away from what's actually happening? Because I stayed quiet for 3 years telling myself I was being fair. Was that love or was that cowardice? I still don't know. Tell me what you think. The settlement came 8 months later. I won't say it was a victory. I'll say it was an accounting. The trust amendment was voided. The $41,000 was returned to my mother's estate. The original trust, the one Mom had signed before the amendment, the one that split everything equally, was reinstated. Renee's power of attorney was revoked. The financial elder abuse finding was referred to the Travis County District Attorney's Office. I don't know, as of right now, where that stands. The law moves slowly and quietly, like water finding its level. My mother is still alive. She's in a memory care facility in Cedar Park now, the kind with a courtyard and a garden that someone tends, with pink knockout roses along the fence that she notices some days and doesn't others. I visit every week. Sometimes she knows exactly who I am. Sometimes she calls me by her own mother's name. Both versions of her still reach for my hand the same way. Renee didn't come to the facility for 4 months after the settlement. When she finally came, I was there. We sat in that courtyard with Mom between us, the 3 of us, and the silence was the kind that has a whole history inside it. Mom held both of our hands. She looked from one face to the other. She said, "My girls." That's all she said. My girls. I don't know what to do with that. I've been turning it over for months. She's not wrong. We are her girls. One of us tried to steal from her, and one of us caught it, and she holds us both the same way. I don't know if that's the purest form of love or the saddest thing I've ever witnessed. Here's what I know for certain. My mother did not have a simple will with a trusted attorney. She did not have an independent financial advisor. She did not have a single document that wasn't controlled by the one person managing her daily life. She was not stupid. She was not careless. She was old and tired and trusting, and she was surrounded. That can happen to anyone's mother. The pecan tree in the backyard on Crestwood Drive still drops every fall. The house sold last spring as part of the estate settlement. Some young couple from Houston bought it. I saw the listing. They painted the brown shutters white. I stared at the photo for a long time. I keep the blue folder in my desk drawer in Dallas. All the paperwork. The notary statement. The GP notation. Patricia's filings. I keep it there not because I think I'll need it again, but because some part of me still can't believe it's over. That the most important fight of my life was waged with a legal pad and a file cabinet and a quiet woman in Round Rock who didn't blink. No courtroom drama, no confrontation in the rain, just paper, just patience, just the slow, grinding work of proving that something wrong happened to someone who deserved better. That's the part they don't put in the movies. If you have an aging parent, please, make sure they have their own attorney, not the family's attorney, not the helpful sibling's recommendation. Their own, an independent voice. It costs less than you think, and it matters more than you can imagine until the moment it does. Share this if it made you think. Because somewhere right now, there's a blue folder in a file cabinet that nobody's looked at yet. My mother taught her 3rd graders that the wanting to know is the whole point. She was right about that. She was right about a lot of things. I just wish I'd listened sooner.